Traffic volumes are expected to peak across the country from this afternoon as travellers make their way back from different destinations. The officials of the African National Congress joined church services across the province of Mpumalanga as part of the build-up to the January 8th statement event to be held in Mbombela Stadium next week, Saturday. And the South African government's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice is set to be one of the world's biggest legal showdowns. A very good afternoon. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you very much for tuning in. You're watching The Week Ahead. You can interact with us on social media platforms. It's at Week Ahead, and our hashtag is The Week Ahead. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabalane. Leading our bulletin this hour, the ANC-NEC says it's impressed with the progress it has made since the 2023 January 8th statement. Now, addressing the media at the Mbombela Stadium in Mpumalanga ahead of the January 8th statement event, the Subcommittee on Monitoring, Planning and Evaluation, as well as the Task Team on Coalitions, said ANC principles need to be upheld to ensure proper service delivery to South Africans.
Preparations are well underway at the Mbombela Stadium ahead of the much-anticipated January 8th statement, and so are the briefings by ANC-NEC members. Various committees took turns briefing the media on the progress they made as the ANC. The task team that looks into coalitions in the ANC believes that coalitions work well when the parties involved share the same set of principles.
These coalitions, at least where we have looked at them and what informed the reason to review, is they are not making progress for communities. And in many areas, what we put as the principles, this minimum program, in many areas that's a shared set of values, including on governance. And that they wouldn't compromise. The ANC doesn't want to be part of a coalition that would compromise its own standing. For example, a coalition where part of the deal making results in corruption.
Meanwhile, the Subcommittee on Monitoring, Planning and Evaluation says municipalities need to work diligently to provide proper services to residents.
Many communities suffered the indignities of sewerage spillage, of refuse not being collected, water being interrupted, as well as potholes. At the same time, unresponsive local government that didn't necessarily respond to communities. The ANC, therefore, at the beginning of the year set up the local government intervention task teams in addition to the monitoring and evaluation team to be able to look at how do we address these indignities and then be able to make sure that our local governments, where the ANC are the majority, are able to respond to these issues. So amongst the things that we've done is to meet with all of our municipalities across the country on more than one occasion, and to then impress on them the importance of being responsive to communities.
On the question of allegations of corruption against Higher Education and Training Minister Blade Nzimande, the Monitoring, Planning and Evaluation Subcommittee says the processes dictate that the Secretary General of the ANC should summon Nzimande to the Integrity Commission. The allegations come after the organization Undoing Tax Abuse Outer revealed that Nzimande and the NSFAS chairperson Ernest Khoza allegedly received kickbacks worth millions of rands from NSFAS's service providers. Nhlanhla Jele, SABC News, Mbombela, Mpumalanga.
All right, now to discuss the upcoming January 8th statement is political analyst Sandile Swana. Mr. Swana, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mfundo, and good afternoon to your viewers.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So 112 is most certainly a great milestone for the party, but the ANC reaches it amid governance, financial, as well as operational troubles in both the party and government. What kind of a reception do you foresee party members, including the president, receiving during their door-to-door campaigns?
Yes, thank you. Mfundo, the door-to-door campaigns are a very different matter to being in the stadium where you've collected only ANC members. When you go door to door, you are then going to confront the people, some of them who have been facing sewerage that is unattended for 4 years, others who have children who've completed degrees, others have completed N6, others have completed their BTECs, who have not had a job at all, some for 4, 7 years unemployed. So the reception of the representatives of the ruling party in South Africa, the African National Congress, is likely to be a little bit cold and at other times hostile.
I'm glad that you already touch on the aspect of filling the stadium, because the party is already of the view that the rally itself will be massive. And when we speak, there's this term stadiumology that most would speak of, the political parties, their ability to fill particular stadiums. When we look at that, do the numbers necessarily correlate with the support at the polls?
They do not necessarily correlate with support at the polls, but there is something that they do say. They do speak a lot in terms of black politics, more especially. You will remember that at some stage when Mandela, in the early days when Mandela came out of prison, he went to PE, and there were 390,000 people who came to listen to him. Which was like the FNB by 4 times, FNB Stadium by 4 times, more or less. So now the ANC, prudently perhaps, is now going to the smaller stadiums, the 43,000 capacity stadia, and so on and so forth. So I would say that from 1990 until now, the ability of the ANC to be a popular movement, it has been substantially reduced.
But there's also always... Pardon me for interjecting. You can continue?
That is also reflected in its electoral outcomes, by the way.
But there's also always been that argument that over the years, their membership has dwindled, but the number of people who vote for it are far more. They exceed the number of those who are actually card-carrying members. So nevertheless, one would say, even if they can fill the stadium, and it may be a smaller one, it's still not a reflection of the support, because they've always had more people that vote for the party than the members.
Yes, let's say for the sake of argument, they would have between 600,000 and 1 million members, and then the voters supporting the ANC would have been 10 million. Now, there is a big problem still, because you know, I was looking at the statistics. Regardless of what you want to say about the apartheid government and its statistics, around the year 1994, as I recall, the population was around 30 million. Today, it is 60 million. And the votes of the ANC were at some stage around 11 million out of a smaller population. And they are around 10 million and going down. So the total number of people who vote and the total number of people who vote for the ANC, regardless of which calculation you want to do, has been declining.
And then to the former President Zuma aspect that has now really, to a certain extent, been quite the talking point, be it in the political party or even just the public domain. The party convened its NEC meeting for 2024 this weekend, and Fikile Mbalula, when engaging the media, indicated that the issue of the former president would be dealt with in due time, insofar as the supporting of MK is concerned. What are we to read into that statement where he says it will be dealt with in due time, and even went on to tell journalists to look at Rule 25 of their constitution, which is unambiguous as to what they should be doing at this present moment, but he says it will be dealt with in due time. What are you reading into all of that?
I think if we are all sincere, the issue of anybody meddling with Zuma has had negative consequences in the past, to the point that Thulima Donzela said that some form of amnesty and other things must be given to people like Zuma. There is no leader in the ANC, in my judgment, personal judgment, that carries as much individual support as Jacob Zuma. In other words, whether it's Cyril Ramaphosa, Gwede Mantashe, Fikile Mbalula, if they were go head-to-head with Zuma, they wouldn't come out all right. Zuma has got the mass of support. So to quote paragraph 25 of the ANC Constitution is an academic exercise at this point in time. It's just for the journalists to consume that. They are not going to go down that road. They are going to negotiate with Zuma until both sides are satisfied. And that is the only sensible route. Otherwise, we're headed for extraordinary chaos.
And what would be a satisfactory solution here? If you say they are to negotiate and both sides are satisfied, what do you think would be satisfactory?
And bear in mind that what is satisfactory to the comrades may not be satisfactory to the voting public. Zuma's problems in the main, for instance, Zuma has complained about the removal of Judge Hlophe, whereby the only thing that was needed was the ANC to vote in the later stages of the process, to vote to remove him. And previously they voted when a judge has said that indeed impeachment proceedings must go ahead with Phala and Cyril Ramaphosa. The ANC actually blocked that successfully. But when it was time to impeach Judge Hlophe, they didn't vote to stop that. So the ANC's business as a protection racket for comrades, Zuma wants that business to continue. And it has been carried out inconsistently so far. So the satisfactory arrangement could be that all comrades get equal protection from their crimes and offenses from the ANC. That would be one example. Even the step-aside resolution would then be fair to everybody and not certain factions being treated unfairly and others being favored. Those would be the types of things they will have to discuss.
But that ANC of old that was known to close ranks seems to not be favored by the public when you say that there are more supporters that vote for the ANC as opposed to members. So then that becomes the bigger issue, that you satisfy the party members at what expense if you have more people voting for you that aren't card-carrying members?
Yes, this is one problem. And obviously, as I said to you, that the voting public has got a totally different view to the things that the comrades have an appetite for and that they enjoy. So that is going to cause conflict between the ANC and the voting public, for sure. And that conflict at the polls, I want to believe that corruption has had a problem and the protection racket has created problems. But where I think they've lost the most votes since 2008, the election was in 2009, has been the issue that certain systems actually just stopped working. The policing stopped working, post office stopped working, the railway stopped working. So the decline of ANC votes has correlated quite closely with poor performance of public services by the African National Congress. And that has cost them votes. So one has got to keep that. That is corruption, and the protection of corruption has actually been a vehicle that has also brought about inferior performance over a very long time by the African National Congress.
Mr. Son, I want us to explore a bit more your assertions that the former president is possibly more popular than any other president at this present moment, even former. Is this indeed the case when you have a number of the ANC members even writing opinion pieces, expressing their views that he's a spent force, he's no longer as popular as he believes to be? But here you are, you're of the view that the reason they are just placing this matter of MK and deciding that it should be for another day is because you think that it's the popularity element. Is it indeed the case when we're seeing so many of these opinion pieces around his popularity having dwindled?
They may have written popularity or popular pieces and what have you recently. They may have written them even in July 2021, and they could not stomach the crisis. And at the end of the day, they let Zuma walk through the front door and out the back door and let him go free. So some of the people may be sent and planted all over to write opinion pieces But it is what Zuma does on the ground. Zuma is not a man of academics. Zuma delivers punches on the ground, right on the chin. So if they can stand with him on the ground, then we will see. It's concrete. This thing is not going to run for long. May is around the corner, and they have to make a move. And any move they make, Zuma is going to throw a counterpunch. And whether they can take the counterpunch is another matter.
Interesting times ahead until May, when we actually go to the polls. Mr. Swana, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That was political analyst Sandile Swana speaking to us. More news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us. The South African government's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice is set to be one of the world's biggest legal showdowns. The case will be heard by the United Nations top judges in The Hague towards the end of next week and will likely increase the pressure on Israel and its military operations in Gaza.
South Africa's claim is that Israel's military action in Gaza amounts to genocidal acts, and Pretoria wants the International Court of Justice to put temporary measures in place to halt any campaign in the Strip until the case is resolved. Now, this may take months, if not years. Any violations of the 1948 Genocide Convention are some of the most serious allegations the court can adjudicate on, and the process will likely be lengthy and complex. Israel has hit back, saying South Africa's case amounts to blood libel, and it makes Pretoria complicit in the October 7th attack, which killed more than 1,200 Israelis. The United States, Israel's closest ally, also criticized the case. They said the submission was meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever. Turkey, Indonesia, Malaysia, and others have all publicly backed South Africa's case, and around a dozen other nations have described Israel's actions as acts of genocide. The legal battle will happen in different stages. Next week, Pretoria's legal team will try and convince the court to put preliminary measures in place. These could include a legally binding order for Israel to cease all military action until the court reaches its verdict. A decision on these temporary measures could be reached in weeks. Enforcing them is up to the UN Security Council, where the US could veto any action. In the past, only half of the orders of this kind issued by the court have been enforced. The next phase of this case will be the long and drawn-out process of reaching an overall final verdict, a process that could take years. Alex Kadier, SABC News, Brussels.
Now, former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke will join other International Court of Justice judges on the bench when the South African case against Israel is heard in The Hague. South Africa is requesting the ICJ to issue a declaration calling for the immediate halt of bombardment by Israel on Gaza. In a case filed at the ICJ on the 29th of December, South Africa argues that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Now, the case has attracted international interest, with some countries supporting South Africa's court challenge, but the United States of America seems to be supporting Israel. This week, an official from the Biden administration poured cold water on the case. White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby says the U.S. considers the case meritless. Now, Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola asserts that South Africa is presenting a robust case at the International Court. Additionally, the minister mentions the Bushiri case will return to court in March.
It is an important position by the Republic of South Africa, a principled one that stood the test of time since the time of Nelson Mandela. And you will remember that as a country, we regretted the Rwandan genocide because it happened during the elections in our country. So it is an important decision that South Africa has taken to The Hague to stop the genocide that is currently happening in Gaza, so that the country does not have regrets in future, and also the international community and the world. We must act in real time and now. So that is what the South African legal team will be requesting from the ICJ, to issue an injunction that will enable them to stop the state of Israel to continue the genocide. And the substantive matters will then be dealt with at a later stage. But an urgent one is to stop the genocide, which is a principled position, and is also to ensure that we restore the respect of the rule of law in the international architecture of the law, the outcomes and the court. But South Africa is taking a very strong case to the court, and with a very capable legal team, people that have participated in the processes of the ICJ, in international law, and also to restore and assert human rights across the globe. So we are confident that in terms of substance and also in terms of the technicalities related to the court, the country has got a good leg to stand on and the case to take to the court. From the 10th, and we will be leaving, the teams will be leaving from tomorrow evening, and everyone will be there, will arrive obviously in drips and drabs, will be there from the 10th. As I have said and repeatedly said, is that extradition is a protracted legal process. They will definitely come back to our country. We are continuing with the processes through the central authority to ensure that they are extradited to come back to the Republic of South Africa. Like any other case of extradition, it will take time, but they will definitely come back. It's the same as you are aware. The matter will be in court in March. It's set down for almost 3 days. I believe the substance of the matter will be dealt with, the substance of the extradition request during that period of March, and he will also come back to account in the Republic of South Africa for the sins that the prosecuting authority wanted them for.
A former International Criminal Court prosecutor has commended South Africa for seeking intervention from both the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice on the current situation in Gaza. Israel is continuing with bombardment of Gaza, with a death toll exceeding 20,000 people killed, the majority being women and children. South Africa has defined the acts of Israel's defense force as genocide. Rapelang Khadebe speaks to Pakiso Muchokocho, a recently retired ICC prosecutor.
A retired ICC prosecutor now enjoying the scenery and tranquility of the Mountain Kingdom. However, he has not lost touch with what is happening in The Hague and around the world. This is a man once banned by the former United States President Donald Trump after the ICC indicated that it will investigate atrocities in Afghanistan where US soldiers were deployed. He has weighed on the current crisis in the Middle East.
It is a good move by South Africa. It shows that South Africa is embracing international law, international criminal law, and that it wants the rule of law to be respected. This is particularly pertinent for South Africa, having lived through apartheid, having seen, and for people who have been to Palestine and Israel, they will know that now what is happening in Palestine and Israel is the worst form of apartheid. It is the worst form of apartheid. And South Africa, having lived through this experience, it knows how this feels like. It knows what apartheid and now, in fact, what is now being everybody's calling a genocide, how that happens, and that is what is happening. So South Africa must be really applauded for taking this stand. It is being supported by many other countries, and we hope that the outcome will be favorable. Israel will defend itself to show why it is not, why the allegations against them are not true or how they are unfounded, and the judges of the ICJ will make their decisions on that now, will make a finding as is normal in any court of law.
In Gaza,
South Africa and other countries have called for a ceasefire. However, this issue has fallen onto deaf ears. Pretoria has taken the matter to the International Criminal Court and to the International Court of Justice.
Would we have the pointers perhaps that of things that would say, definitely this is what to look at? Without getting into the
yeah, no, I've not had the privilege of looking at the South African arguments on this in the papers. Now, I've not had that privilege of looking at, so I really don't know. But I think it is generally accepted. Everybody describes what is happening now in Israel, Palestine, as genocide. A genocide, generally speaking, is the targeting of a specific group with the intention of exterminating that group. exterminating all that group. That is in terms of the Genocide Convention. So you must target a specific group, and you must target them with a view to totally annihilating them as a specific group.
The International Court of Justice will hear the matter on Thursday and Friday. Rapelang Khatebe, SABC News, Masego, Lesotho.
Now, joining us on this matter is Sophie Mkwena, SABC News International Editor. Sophie, good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Good afternoon, actually.
It's a pleasure to always have you with us. Now, a very important week for South Africa as well as Israel at The Hague. This application, Sophie, I must say, took many by surprise, particularly those who had accused South Africa of paying lip service to their support of Palestine. Just talk us through this application.
Well, I think the application, the intention is to stop what's happening in the Middle East. As you heard there from the former prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, who's now based in Lesotho, a man with vast experience because he has been to The Hague and they've dealt with these kind of issues, even though the International Criminal Court is focusing on individuals, that the intention is to stop what's happening right now. And therefore, you can then go back later with proper evidence to ensure that you are able to ask the court to pronounce whether this is a genocide and the accountability to follow thereafter. Perhaps to even take the matter to the International Criminal Court, as South Africa has done, where individuals will have to account. And therefore, the main issue here in terms of this application is to ensure that there's in terms of the provision, you stop what's happening. In other words, almost like a ceasefire, and this should be a directive from the court. The second issue is to ensure that you ask the two parties, that is South Africa and Israel, as signatories of the Genocide Convention, to ensure that they are committed to ensuring that there is no genocide anywhere in the world, because these countries are signatories of the Genocide Convention. The other important issue is to desist from measures that are including perhaps expulsion or removing people where they are. You know that earlier on, Israel did ask the people of Gaza to move from the north to the south. When they were on the south, they were told to move to the north, and in between they were being killed. The other issue is to ensure that ordinary people have access to food, clothes, water, and all what they need, including infrastructure, but of course, the sanitation as well, particularly women. And also you have to ensure that you have medical supply to ordinary people. You know that the World Health Organization has pointed out that the medical infrastructure has been completely demolished, and it is a crisis, and you can also have diseases in that part of the world. And when people are injured, you don't have hospitals where you can take them for them to get treatment. These are the issues that South Africa wants. And you know that the United Nations, the Secretary General, has lamented the fact that humanitarian aid is not reaching ordinary people. And therefore, you are actually, it's another form of a genocide, because people will die of hunger, diseases, and injuries because there are no hospitals. And you know that only yesterday, the Secretary General of the United Nations pointed out that in terms of personnel, UN personnel that has been killed in this conflict, they surpass the number in terms of those people who were killed in terms of medical staff during the Second World War. And therefore, you look at media as well. Just now, there was a breaking story in Gaza that the son of the Al Jazeera bureau chief has just been killed, and therefore more journalists are dying also, and the number is huge. We were told by international organizations that protect journalists that a number of journalists that have been killed during this conflict is huge.
Then to the divergent views post this application by South Africa. We know that there are many that have shown their support. Clayson Munyela has been very instrumental in making sure that most of those statements from certain countries of support are publicized, among them being Turkey, I know Malaysia has also endorsed the application, and then the OIC also has, the Islamic organization, has also endorsed. Talk to us about some of the views that have come out post this application across the board.
Well, clearly there are countries that are supporting South Africa because they want to see an end to this bombardment. On the other hand, you have those countries that are supporting Israel. A country like the United States of America is firmly behind Israel. And it is no surprise. You know that the military equipment that Israel is using currently, some of the military comes from the United States of America. And this case, when the next phase starts, where you want to prove whether this was a genocide or not, you will then have to also bring in those countries that made it possible for Israel to allegedly commit this genocide. And therefore countries such as United States of America, I'm sure where they are really panicking. And it comes at a time where the US is supposed to go to the elections. And therefore Joe Biden is having a tough time back home. You see in different cities in the United States of America, huge support for the Palestinian cause because people are basing that on human rights. You have countries in the West who are part of the supporters of the Americans and Israel who are now dancing. You look at what France is saying now, it can go anyway. And then you have countries such as Germany who are reluctant to be forceful because you know that the Second World War, the Jews were killed in Germany, and therefore that guilty conscience and also fear that you are again opening yourself for criticism because at some point in time a similar genocide was committed in Germany, and therefore they are not clear. But the reality is the countries of the South will definitely rally behind South Africa. My only observation is that in the Middle East, these big countries like your Saudi, your United Arab Emirates, your Qatar, much as they claim that they support Palestinians, they haven't come out clear in terms of their views in relation to this case. Also, I am not surprised. I mean, we deal with these stories all the time. You know that the United States of America has influence on Saudi and on the United Arab Emirates, including Qatar. And therefore, I think they are also trying to avoid a situation where they can make America angry, because you also have huge American soldiers in contingent in these countries. And therefore, I think this is a very big case, as it was pointed out. And South Africa, yes, it is a small country. It doesn't have the military might of countries such as the United States of America. But as the former prosecutor pointed out, you know that in 1994, at this time, there were signs that there's going to be a genocide in Rwanda. Now, South Africa had its own challenges where there was violence in the country ahead of elections. And therefore, when Rwandese called for help, they called the African National Congress. I remember Mbeki telling us that story, that they did call them to ask them to intervene, to ask, because there were reports that the then apartheid government was supplying arms to people who committed genocide, trying to ask them to ask the then apartheid regime to stop supplying the other side with arms to avoid what was coming. And South Africa didn't respond. And today, South Africa, particularly the current government under the ANC, regret that they didn't do anything.
And I suppose the legitimacy of South Africa, though a small country, is not one that can be disputed, because South Africa lived under apartheid. So if ever there was an applicant that would have that legitimacy, it would be South Africa, that when they talk of an apartheid state, they would know what they're talking about. But beyond that, when we talk of the divergent views, it's not just in the world, but also internally in the country. There have been voices that have been strongly opposed to this application, one being that of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. They went on to release a statement quite scathing, actually saying that South Africa continues to embarrass itself on the international stage because they are inconsistent. When it suits them, they do not adhere to international law such as the ICC, and then now here they would apply before the ICJ. What did you make of that statement from the Jewish Board of Deputies?
Well, I understand they support Israel, and therefore they feel that what South Africa is doing is not right. But I think when you look at South Africa, if you were to blame South Africa in relation to the International Criminal Court, South Africa played a prominent role in relation to the establishment of the ICC, because Madiba signed that proclamation. It was even domesticated. That's how serious South Africa took the ICC. But there were issues. Secondly, you know that when you look at the history of since 1994, the country has tried to intervene where there are conflicts, at times even speaking to people who are blamed for atrocities to try to bring them to the negotiating table. I mean, now recently the president met a warlord from Sudan, because the intention is to bring these two generals to negotiating table to ensure that you stop the genocide. It is a genocide in Darfur and in Sudan. And therefore, I think if they had done their homework, they would realize that South Africa has tried. But the reality is, it is understandable. Remember, they are on the side of Israel. And that is why I said it doesn't mean that everybody supports South Africa. And therefore, this is some of examples of different groups, including in South Africa, including other political parties in South Africa. They are supporting Israel. You have other political parties such as the EFF who are very vocal in terms of their support for Palestinians, and therefore you have these different views in the country, including on the continent, around the world, including in the respective countries. You have people in Israel who will support South Africa's position because they want to see an end to this bombardment. You have people in the Middle East who might be on the side of Israel. And therefore, the reality is, in any conflict, you will always have people supporting the other side and perhaps this side. And therefore, it is not something new. But when I look at what's coming in South Africa, the elections that are coming, this matter is going to have impact. When you look at people in South Africa who are supporting the Palestinians and organizations that are supporting Palestinians, I can't see those people voting for a party that doesn't support their stance. And that is why I'm saying, that's why you have now, at this point in time, the Secretary of State of the United States of America blinking in the Middle East to try and ensure that this thing comes to an end and the hostages are released so that they can focus on campaigning.
No, it will most certainly be an interesting week next week, whatever the outcome. The reality is that South Africa has brought back the conversation around Israel. Whatever is happening in Gaza right now, it's brought it back as a conversation in household. And this Thursday and Friday, we'll find out exactly what will become of that particular matter. Will there indeed be a ceasefire? Thank you very much. That's Sophie Mokoena, SABC News International Editor, talking to us. More news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. The N3 toll concession is expecting traffic volumes to increase this weekend as thousands of holiday makers head home. Extra law enforcement officers have been deployed to strategic points along the highway. Motorists have been urged to prepare for possible congestion and delays, with high volumes expected on the N3 as well as the N2. Our reporter Nonhlakanipho Makwaza has more.
As you can see, cars are trickling in, not as much as before. It's not bumper to bumper as yesterday, but the Department of Transport and the N3TC or toll concession did say that the traffic will start picking up probably in the afternoon, in the late hours of the afternoon. But they did receive, or they did count over 1,000 cars that were going past the Marian Hill Toll Plaza as well as the Moy River Toll Plaza. We managed to ambush some of the motorists who are making their way into Durban instead of going back home. Good afternoon and welcome to our show. Please just tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Mahali Malaitala with my beautiful daughter here, Palisa. We are coming from Limpopo province, a village called Sehopo under Hoshimatsorwani.
I see you are making your way to Durban as some motorists are making their way out of Durban. Where are you guys going?
We are going for a vacation. I'm with my baby. She's just afraid of screens. We are going for a vacation. We are just going to refresh and freshen up so that when we go back to work next week, we go there so fresh and pure and soft.
And how was your travel from Limpopo? What time did you leave Limpopo? And on your way, did you encounter any major incidences? How was your travel?
We traveled from home at 2 a.m. We are exhausted, but we didn't meet any accident on the way. Yeah, we had a nice trip. Yeah, generally we had a nice trip.
And en route to Durban, did you drive all the way? Did you rest? Tell us about your travels.
We just took a 1 hour nap there at Shell Garage. After Montrose, yeah, somewhere there. Yeah.
Enjoy your stay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, that was one of the motorists. As you can see, most of them are standing from all the way from Gauteng, Limpopo. There are many registration number plates standing on the side of the road who are making their way to Durban. They say that they couldn't come because, during the festive season because they felt that it would be too busy. Rather, they should come now when everyone is making their way back home. And on our way here from Moy River, we did, as you can see, the weather compared to Moy River here, it's a bit cloudy and it's starting to drizzle. Motorists have been urged to exercise caution when traveling on the N3 because of the weather conditions. As you all know that last month during the festive season, there was flooding, especially in Ladysmith, and most of the roads were destroyed because of the floods that took place just before Christmas Eve. And just before Pietermaritzburg, there are roadworks and as well as misty conditions. So motorists have been advised to exercise caution and to adhere to the speed limits. As you can see as well that the traffic officers are still continuing with their search and the stop and search procedures, checking on documents, whether or not drivers have proper licenses that are up to date, and checking on the state of their vehicles, whether the vehicle is roadworthy and whether it is licensed. As you can see from the police officer right here is checking all the details, whether they correspond with the car, and across the road, other motorists as well are being stopped. They are being searched. They're not just stopping taxis. They're stopping all motorists, and in some instances earlier on, trucks were also being stopped and searched, and just to check if their vehicles are worthy to be on the road. So far, we have not received any isolated incidences, but he did mention that over the course of the festive season, they've stopped over 80,000 vehicles, and 6,000 of those were not roadworthy, and 6,000 of those vehicles, people were arrested and they were fined. Some of them were fined because of their vehicles not being roadworthy. Some of them, most of them, what was the major concern for the Department of Transport was that most of these drivers were driving under the influence of alcohol, and some of them did not have proper documentation. They didn't even have a learner's license or a driver's license, and some of the vehicles are not roadworthy. They didn't have any licenses to say that the vehicle has been certified as roadworthy. But so far today we did not receive any incidences. But the N3CC also mentioned that most of the accidents that happened along the N3 were due to driver negligence driver negligence. It's human error that caused the accidents that happened on the N3. Although we didn't have any major accidents that passed away with many lives, but they did have like 3 or 4 people passing away on our roads. I did speak to the Department of Transport today. They said that probably tomorrow they'll have a media briefing as the MSC was not available today. They did have a minor operation today in the early hours of the morning, and they are expecting that tomorrow they might also come back as some motorists are also expected to make their way back to their respective homes tomorrow, those who took leave or those who will be starting the work on the following day. He did say that he will let us know. Probably tomorrow they'll have a media briefing that will outline how many accidents we had on the road and how many vehicles in total, or just a rough figure of the vehicles that passed our toll routes on the N3 and the N2.
Now, with the start of a new year, many people will be out hunting for jobs. There are already a flurry of online job advertisements using government and official business names, many which are fake. Cyber criminals have become more sophisticated, with unsuspecting victims continue to fall on their tricks. Online security experts are warning job seekers to be extra vigilant when responding to adverts.
New year, new resolutions for job seekers. But this is also an opportunity for cyber criminals. Already, social media platforms are teeming with fake job advertisements. One business owner has been fielding calls from people saying they paid a certain individual money in exchange for a job at her security company.
So one particular person called me and they said they applied for a job, and actually they paid this particular person money, and they were asking to see when can they actually start the job, and it turned out that no, we didn't know of any open vacancies and the person disappeared. So it's quite a number of people that actually applied for jobs and they paid this particular person money, 300 to be specific, and the person disappeared.
The Basic Education Department, Stats SA, as well as the City of Ekurhuleni Municipality have had to explain and dismiss as fake news social media postings that they were hiring.
The city never advertises positions on social media. Any position that is advertised on social media is actually fake. That is a job scam, and people must be vigilant around that particular issue. So we do appeal once again to the people of Ekurhuleni and any other person for that matter to say, if you find a job advert that is done through social media, please ignore. It's not legitimate, it's fake, and you are going to be scammed of your money.
SABC News also tried to apply to one of the job ads and was directed to this website. International cybersecurity expert N.D. Mashaile says internet users must remain vigilant at all times.
The applications for the job scams that are going through internationally as well as in South Africa, you and I know that cybercrime is a transnational crime. So what happens overseas or in other parts of the world would be mirrored here in South Africa, because the cyber criminals sort of work hand in glove from a modus operandi point of view. What are these telltale signs? When a job scam requires for your personal information meaning your ID number, your home address, and many of those things, you need to be extra vigilant and extra careful. The second telltale sign would be your bank details being requested upfront, and the third one being the communication regarding the job only being on your chat apps, the apps that you use, your chat apps, your social media apps like your WhatsApp, your Signal, your Trimmer, and all other social media that we use, messenger social media applications.
Online job seekers are advised to look out for spelling and grammatical errors on job posts and never send money to recruiters in advance. Kelebogile Botlholo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And that's where we leave it for today. We're back next week. Enjoy your afternoon further.